Okay, we'll start our regular session this evening, and we appreciate everybody that's here this evening. As you can notice, that our general manager is not here with us this evening, but our chief operating officer is sitting in for our GM. And Rick Shintako is on his way home from Washington, D.C., and he appeared before the Natural Resources Committee this morning, and it was a very successful event. He was, and this is a bill that's being presented by our Congressman Michael Levin locally here, and it's specifically focused on desal. I know I have something to read, Jody, and it's coming right here. There it is. And so anyway, let me read the exact bill. Okay, he was a witness for H.R. 3723. And to promote desalinization projects, development, and drought resilience, and other purposes. The Desalinization Development Act, that's what the Levin bill is called. And he spoke on behalf of the district's Doheny Ocean Desal projects. And the chairman of that, I got feedback from the attorney that was with Rick today, Jim Barker, and the feedback was, the chair of that committee says this was the best presentation he'd heard all day, and there was 14 presentations. So Rick did a great job. He had 5 minutes, and he got his point through, and no questions at the end. So that's quite unique to have a committee. There's, I don't know, a dozen, 10, 12 people on the committee. So it was a good outcome for us today. So good job. Yes, Wayne.
Well, I just wanted to note that our public information officer, Sonia, sent an email with a link to the video of that presentation. And I'm wondering, Sonia, if we could put that up on our website so that anyone that's interested could, from our website, go to the watch the video. It's on YouTube, I think. Is that correct? Yes.
It is. I got a message saying it wasn't working properly, but I will fix that, and I will put it on the website.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, okay. Well, we'll get started here, and we're going to ask our general counsel, Mr. Art Kidman, to report out any actions that were during the closed session.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, on the first item on the agenda, which had to do with real property negotiation, an action was taken that needs to be reported, and that is that the board voted unanimously to authorize legal counsel to file a complaint and intervention in existing litigation involving real property in which the Water District has an interest. And when that action is complete, then, of course, the information about the name of the lawsuit and the other parties will be made available. As to the second item on the agenda that related to anticipated litigation, there was no reportable action.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Then at this time, we will call for oral communications, and we do have a request to speak, and the speaker will be given 3 minutes. And our first individual is, maybe this is under item 10. It says new business, so maybe we'll hold this for item 10. So we have no others, or do we have any others to speak?
Six.
It's 6. I'm sorry, I said 10. Item 6. Okay, so it's okay. So we'll hold that until that time comes up. So the next item on our agenda: are there any requests for the directors to be outside of the district? I haven't heard of any. Joe, any? No. Okay, very good. Thank you. And now we'll go to our consent item, where we have 5 items this evening, and if anyone from the public, from the staff, or from the board would like to pull any items, otherwise we will approve all at once.
Move consent.
Okay, we have a motion. We have
Second.
a second. Okay. Yeah.
Item number 4 to be pulled, please.
Okay, we'll pull 4. So on items 1, 2, 3, and 5, we have a motion and a second. And so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Did you want a staff report on that, Director Urkeneff? Item 4?
Yeah, I just, mostly just a comment and then one question. The item is the drought tolerant landscape programs, which I think has been a great success for our district and for our customers. There was one line in here that talked about on page 2, the following, about halfway down the page, the following include current landscape incentive programs available to South Coast Water District customers. And the first is rebate for turf replacement with synthetic turf, $2 per square foot up to 1,000 square feet. First question is, if a customer does not want to put in synthetic turf, is that still available at $2?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
good. So I would encourage more of native plants than plastic fake grass. And then the next line down is a $3 per square foot up to 5,000. Can a customer combo those two together to effectively get $5 a square foot, or is it one or the other? Or, I'm curious as to how that would play out.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to have to get that back for the board. I'm not positive. Rather than take a guess, I'll get that
Okay.
information.
And knowing what we were incentivized through MET during the drought periods, now up to potentially even $3 a square foot's a pretty good chunk of money. So hopefully, some customers will take advantage of that and continue to be paid to do the right thing.
Yeah, I would say or surmise that it cannot be combined. The reason that MoDOC went to $3 a square foot is they're only funding for California-friendly plants. They're not funding for
Anything
synthetic
about
turf.
that? Got it. Understood. Okay. So maybe at a future time we can send a clarification on that, or are you
I
pretty
will.
confident?
I'll make sure. I'll
Okay.
clarify and get back.
That was my only question, other than thanking all the folks that have been out there in front of that. So I'll move that item.
Okay. And we have a second. We have Director Erdman beat you, Director Wayne. Okay. Okay, so all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So that carries. That takes us on to our new business. Now that we're talking about item number 6. And we'll go through, first of all, we'll let Jody's going to do the staff report this evening on this item. And so take it away.
This is my second staff report this year, also the second in my career.
I remember the first one. Great, too.
So as the directors know, at our last board meeting held on July 11th, we had a request from a member of the public from Dana Point, who's here again tonight, George Miller, to have a display in our boardroom with the words "In God We Trust." Staff did some research on this, and I did contact the city of Dana Point, who also received this same request last year. And so we put together a brief staff report. This item is for the board's consideration, just to decide if you would, if we would like to pursue this. I will tell you that as clerk of the board, we have received emails and letters both in opposition and support of this item. So with that, I will turn it back to the board for discussion.
Okay, and then I think we'll go to public comments first. So, George, Mr. Miller, come up. You got your 3 minutes? Yes, sir.
Yes, President Green, board members, staff. My name is George Miller. I'm a South Coast Water District customer and also reside in Dana Point. I want to thank the board for scheduling this item on tonight's agenda. I come before you this evening to request action by the South Coast Water District Board for something that should be in place in all public institutions. My request is that the words "In God We Trust" be adopted by the board and placed in a prominent position in your chambers here. These 4 words, "In God We Trust," are the official motto of the United States of America since 1956 and reaffirmed by Congress in 2011. These words first appeared on coins in 1864, and in 1955, President Eisenhower required them to be placed on all currency. These words appear in the House of Representatives chamber over their tribune. These 4 words also appear in the 4th stanza of the Star-Spangled Banner, our national anthem. Many buildings throughout the country have these words emblazoned across their edifices. There are movements across the country installing, and in some instances reinstalling, these basic words of the United States of America. 11 states even have these words on their license plates, and another 8, you can get them by request. 21 cities in Orange County have already adopted "In God We Trust" and are in place in their council chambers, the latest being the city of Dana Point last December. The County Board of Education also has these words displayed in their meeting location. The legality of "In God We Trust" has been frequently challenged through the courts and has withstood all of these challenges, the first challenge being in 1970. A court ruling in 2018 found that these words on our currency is not a religious endorsement, and another court case just this past month stated and found the same thing, and this case was rejected by the Supreme Court. In 2015, a federal court rejected the notion that these 4 words violated the Constitution, and the Supreme Court refused to hear that case also. I have found nothing in my research that prohibits this board from adopting the words "In God We Trust." I am requesting and urging the board to take action and adopt these words "In God We Trust." It is the patriotic thing to do, and in these times, it is a very wise thing to do. And I thank you for your consideration in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Are there any other requests to speak on this?
No, that's all we have.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you, George, for your time and effort in bringing this to our attention. And also, I'd like to thank all those that this particular item. I don't think we've had many other items that have had any real responses one way or the other, but we've had quite a bit of response on this particular item. And so the national motto, "In God We Trust," which is displayed on currency and in the House of Representatives and the courts, you've heard what George has mentioned about that. It's intended to be more patriotic and ceremonial. But as personally, I certainly support those things, being an old Eagle Scout and those types of things, and our motto is "In God and Country." But we have had a significant number of write-ins, so I would really like, it's up to the board, but I would like to present perhaps that we take the extra caution and have staff do the review just a little bit more on this and bring it back after we, maybe between staff and council, to make sure that we're not having any issues at this point in time. There is always the potential of, I guess I can let our attorney talk, but there's always potentials of drawing some litigation, and are we willing to take those types of risk on? But I'll just, Art, did you want to expound at all on, or did we covered enough?
I think you have covered.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think you did cover it.
Okay.
Just a question of whether or not you want to have further study on this.
So it's up to the pleasure of the board.
Well, I'll move that we ask our general counsel and staff to engage in further study and come back when they're done with the information that we need to make a decision on. So that was a motion.
That's a motion?
To authorize them to go forward on the analysis.
So since we have some opposition, I will second that motion that we get further review and bring it back to the board and sooner than later, as soon as we can.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that covers it. Thank you, George. Appreciate your time. We're off to the next item this evening, which is the issuance of the revolving line of credit with the Opus Bank not to exceed $25 million. And I think our going to turn that over to Pam, and she will present the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. President and Board of Directors. The item here tonight is to ask for the approval of a revolving line of credit with Opus Bank. As you know, and I brought to the board previously, the state is having issues reimbursing us for our costs involved in the tunnel project, which is creating a cash flow issue for our agency. And this line of credit will help alleviate that due to their software conversion at the state. They can't really guarantee when we'll get reimbursed for the costs that we submit. They have notified me that they will be sending us $15 million based on the latest reimbursement we sent them. Unfortunately, because there was such a delay in improving phase 2 of the project, almost a year, we accrued quite a bit of costs, and we submitted reimbursement for over $17 million, and they did approve the $15 million, which they're going through the state controller's office to get it paid. However, they cannot guarantee after that payment when we would ever see another, how long it would take to see another payment. So the revolving line of credit is important, and so we have our finance advisor, Phil Monrola, and our attorney, Brian Forbath from Stradlin Yaka. Laura and Robert are here representing Fieldman, and they have a presentation. All three of them will be part of the presentation.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Ray.
Hi. Just before you start, I have a question for our Chief Financial Officer. So it's pretty disheartening that this is the state we're in. Not the state of California, but the state of... I'm very proud to be Californian, sorry. The situation we're in. Do you have any idea how far out they're predicting this predicament to be? I mean, could we be another year or two out, or
Well,
and then in future, it's a software conversion, so you think you only have to do this once. I'm just concerned with us needing more money at a future date sooner than later.
I had a conversation this morning with Christopher Stevens, who's the project engineer, and the question I had to him was, what has to happen is they will write, there's a letter of that our attorney, Brian's been working with their attorneys with. Once that letter is approved, then they need to amend the contract, because our original contract does not have a revolving line of credit, I believe. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian.
Yes.
So my conversation with him this morning was, I asked him, I just want to confirm, what timeline are we looking at to get the letter signed and that line in the amendment? And he said, well, the letter may be in 2 weeks. The amendment will take longer, maybe 2 to 3 months. And then I asked him, what about the reimbursement? And he said, I can't give you any guarantee for anything. When they talked to us back in, I believe it was in June, the last time I talked to him about that, they said they were shutting their system down for several months, and that we just need to keep putting our reimbursements in for the queue, which we are doing. So that's the best information I was given today. So I think this, getting the line of credit will be important. It will help us get through some of this. My concern is we're going to get phase 4 approved, and we're going to be submitting that contract. And, how long will it take them to approve that? They took almost a year for phase 2, and they didn't communicate with us. Then we're going to be going in January possibly for phase 3. So I think we just keep on them, keep calling and finding out what's going on. But that's the latest news I've gotten from them.
So the good news is we're getting a payment of sorts. And
Yes, which will
is
be
that an
very, very
electronic
helpful.
transfer, or is that going to be dump trucks full of
They
nickels?
send us a check, actually.
Oh, a check.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Sorry to derail.
No,
the
no interruption necessary. I think that was
Well,
a good
I
conversation to have.
just wanted to make one comment. Having been involved with many software conversions, and you as well, they never go well. And just ask the LA Department of Water and Power. So let's hope we don't fall into that abyss or that sinkhole. No, that's a bad analogy.
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to reiterate something that I mentioned at a previous meeting, and that is that we are not the only agency that is being held hostage here, or if that's the right term, but we are not getting the money that we requested in a timely way. But the State Revolving Loan Fund affects literally hundreds of agencies across the state. And I think that there would be value in combining the efforts to make this problem less onerous on all of the affected parties by gathering together, either through the California Special Districts Association or use another vehicle, the Aqua group of attorneys. Somewhere we ought to be able to muster the forces necessary to bring more attention to this matter in Sacramento and to find a workaround solution. There are companies who are in the business of making payments, processing payments, and that's what this is. It's a payment processing issue. They could contract with the private sector, the state could contract with the private sector to process these payments while their software is being overhauled, if there is pressure brought to bear on them. But if no one brings pressure to bear, it's not going to happen. And all of these agencies are going to be saddled with getting some kind of short-term coverage at the cost to their ratepayers. And these are inhabitants of the state of California. We're already pretty heavily taxed here in California. We don't need this kind of penalty tax put upon us in addition to all the other taxes that we pay. So I think it would behoove this agency to try to gather together with others who are similarly affected and see if we can develop a strategy to go to the state and effect a change.
I would concur, Director. I think that it's an excellent idea, and perhaps when we have our next phone call with the Galco group, maybe we want to engage that. That's the Sacramento person that actually has been helping Pam get some of the money shaken loose at this point. But to go to a broader, he's well positioned to know all those other folks at Aqua, and they all seem to know each other quite well. So maybe that's something, Art, we can put on the on our to-do list.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I think that is a good way to approach that. I'm just continue to be appalled because the responsibility over the revolving fund was moved from the Department of Health over to the State Water Resources Control Board because the Department of Health couldn't get the money out. That was 3 or 4 years ago, and now look, it's even worse than it was before.
I know that we haven't had our presentation yet. However, we were in the South Laguna meeting with Chairman Eric Jensen yesterday, and Cal and others, and the question was asked: what do you think this is going to cost the district, our ratepayers? and the number was about $500,000. This effort, so it's real money, and we're not building anything with it. So, please continue or start. Thank you.
No, I appreciate the communication, the dialogue that has occurred here thus far. Our job here today is to present you with an option to try and alleviate that stress of being able to cash fund and cash flow these reimbursements that are not being received in a timely manner from the state. We echo your concerns about when that timing of receipt will come in from the state. And after hearing what Pam has said from her communication with the State Water Resources Control Board, we still have that concern on our table. So this project and this debt financing, bridge financing, has been brought to your attention due to these concerns. Instead of relying heavily on the district's reserves and in order to maintain the adequate liquidity level, the decision has been made to prepare and to go out to bid for bridge financing to alleviate the stress of having to cash fund reimbursements needed for tunnel project and construction costs going forward. So that being said, we were authorized to move forward with the bidding process. This bidding process was conducted in late May. We sent out RFPs, requests for proposals, to 12 firms at the end of May, and those firms are listed here below in the chart below on the slide. Out of those 12 responses, we received 7 very competitive bids, which are the ones that are not highlighted in green on the slide before you. Out of these bids, all of them adhered to the terms and conditions that are prepared by district staff and presented in the term sheet, as well as ourselves. Finland prepared the request for proposal when we sent it out. Additionally, the responses ranged from both fixed and variable rates. We received a low rate of 1.9 to a highest rate of about 2.92, reflective of current market conditions as of June. District staff and Fieldman Robin Associates went through a detailed review of all the responses, looking at the rates as well as the covenants that were proposed by these bidders and by these banks. We removed any onerous covenants that we thought were detailed and provided less flexibility by the district. That being said, once we eliminate those covenants, we prepared the final recommendation that we believed provided the district with the most favorable terms, the most favorable results. And that came down to our recommendation for Opus Bank. They provided a fixed rate of 1.98%. This fixed rate is payable semi-annually over the course of the final maturity of the loan, which goes through December 1st of 2020. What is important to note is that this fixed rate is payable only on the loan outstanding, the amount of money outstanding and drawn on the loan, which means day one, you're not paying interest on $25 million. You're only paying on what has been drawn up to that point. Secondly, the bank provided no undrawn fee on any remaining amount outstanding on the loan. Thus, you're not paying for amounts that are not being utilized. Additionally, one important covenant that we wanted to point out was that there is no utilization requirement. There's no deadline or timeline. The district must use a certain percentage of the loan going forward. The district can use money as they see fit to meet the tunnel project construction costs, and as reimbursements come in pending their approval, they can prepay this amount at any time with no premium. Additionally, the covenants prepared for the term sheet as well as for the loan agreement. Further detail can be found in the credit agreement that will be gone over by legal counsel. We have prepared similar rate covenants and additional bond test covenants that are the same ones you prepared for outstanding debt covenants for 2016 series and the 2019 series of bonds you have outstanding. Additionally, the liquidity credit facility requires a bank fee of about $10,000 not to exceed, as well as an origination fee of 0.2% of the entire loan amount. So that total sums for the bank and bank counsel at about $60,000. As we presented and as we discussed here momentarily a minute ago, all of these reimbursements from the state are pending the timing of their approval of the documentation, the amendment of the existing loan, as well as their letter to approve these reimbursements. The timing and responsibility to use this loan will change going forward. So on the next slide, we have prepared an analysis of the expected or estimated interest rates over the course of the final maturity through December 1st, 2020. Assuming this drawdown schedule prepared back in May of 2019, assuming the full $25 million is utilized through September of 2020, assuming the fixed interest rate of 1.98%, and assuming that the State Water Resources Control Board does not reimburse in a timely fashion for those interest costs or principal amounts, the total cost on the loan through maturity we're estimating about $470,000. I did want to reiterate that the interest payments, as shown here, are not paid monthly. That just shows the calculation presented to come up with the final amount. It will only be paid semi-annually, starting on December 1st, 2019, and 2 more semi-annual payments made thereafter. We did want to also mention the fixed rate nature of this line of credit. We think is very favorable. There will be no interest rate volatility or interest rate concern over the course of this loan agreement due to the fixed rate nature of the interest rate. It'll be the same 1.98% through final maturity.
I do have a question.
Of course.
You mentioned until December of 20,
Yes.
17 months. In the event that the state doesn't perform, that would never happen, I'm sure of that. But what happens, do we renegotiate a new rate at that time?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Based on current market conditions at that time, there will be no termination fee, but there will be a discussion on how to renegotiate and extend the revolving line of credit at that time. And did want to reiterate as well, this is a revolving line of credit. So as you draw down and as you get reimbursed and pay off that outstanding loan amount, you will be able to, again, draw the full maximum amount that is available to the loan. The last few considerations in this bridge financing process are the remaining amount of cost of issuance, cost for financial advisor, for legal counsel, as well as for a CDEC fee will be incurred by the district to complete and close this loan. We are waiting for, as Pam mentioned, the final approval from the state to acquire reimbursements for the principal, interest, and cost of issuance allocated in connection with this loan agreement. However, we still are on schedule to close next Thursday, August 1st, where the district will be making their first draw amount in the amount of almost $2.9 million. At that moment in time, we'll continue to reach out and communicate with the state about the loan agreement terms and hope to receive the letter itself as well as the amendment in a timely fashion. I'll stop here to answer any further questions.
I'm just doing the numbers. So we have about $105,000 on top of the $476,000. So we're closer to $600,000.
Yes, that's
So
correct.
it's just so everybody's aware of that. Thank you.
Any further questions before I pass it off to Brian Forbath to go over the legal documents? Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, President Green, members of the board. Brian Forbath from Stradling, Yocker, Carlson, Routh. Good to be here in front of you this evening. I'm sorry that we're here for this purpose, but it is what it is. So the actions before you this evening are the approval of a resolution that authorizes the district to enter into a credit agreement with Opus Bank underneath the terms that Laura stated. It also authorizes the issuance of a note. There's a single note that will be issued in an amount up to $25 million. And as Laura stated, it's a revolving note. So as you draw upon it, you make payments up, it gets noted in the books about the outstanding balance, and it gets paid down and so forth. The resolution also authorizes the general manager and the finance director to CFO to enter into other certain certificates and other documents needed by the bank to close the line. As Laura mentioned, the credit agreement brings forward the existing financial covenants that you have in your other outstanding debts. So you're not really agreeing to new or different financial covenants than you already have outstanding. It's secured by a pledge of just the wastewater system net revenues. And then it will require that any amounts that are reimbursed by the state get applied to pay down the loan within 7 business days upon receipt. That in a nutshell is what the documents before you do tonight. As was mentioned, we've had lots of negotiations with the state. I've been on the phone with their lawyers. They've agreed to. We drafted the language that they need for the amendment to your existing State Water Resource Control Board loan. They've had that. It's been signed off by their outside counsel and their legal counsel. So it's really just a matter of bureaucratic hoops to jump through to get them to sign. I mean, they have the language, they have the letter. So it's just sort of pushing across the finish line. But with that, I'm here and I'm more than happy to answer any other questions you might have about the documents in front of you this evening. With that, I'll turn back to Pam for the recommendation.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions. So, Pam? Did you have something, Dennis?
I was just going to note that the Finance Committee reviewed this matter at the committee meeting last week, and we are prepared to recommend to the board approval of this matter.
Thank you. Pam, any final discussion, thoughts?
No,
Okay,
just,
Then looks like we have two items here. We'll just roll them into one and we'll do a roll call. Okay. So I suspect I'll make a motion, or we'll move anyway, that we accept the terms and conditions of Opus One Bank, as well as adopt resolution number 2, 19, and 20. A resolution of the Board of Directors of South Coast Water District approving the issuance of a negotiable promissory note for the purposes of financing tunnel stabilization and sewer pipeline replacement project. So,
I'll second that.
okay. So then we have a roll call.
Director Erkeneff, Director Rayfield,
Aye.
Director Green,
Aye.
Director Dennis Erdman, and Director Doug Erdman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to both firms. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. That takes us on to our next item, public information and legislative update, and our very own Sonia Morgan will lead us that way. Thank you. Good evening, Sonia. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good evening, Board of Directors.
Sonia, have you been in the sun?
I must say, today my daughter was in her first Junior Olympics, and so I was in the sun from 6:30 to 2:30, and I thought I was in the shade, and I put sunscreen on, but
Okay.
that's the dangers of being
I'm
a
sorry, I
rhino.
should have put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. It's okay.
I didn't know you were blushing or burnt.
Well, that's good. Now you don't know I'm blushing, so perfect. I just wanted to go through a couple of things that were on the legislative matrix. There were a couple changes. AB 292, I guess there were questions regarding it last time. Unfortunately, I couldn't be here. And I contacted Julie Hall with Aqua. And she said that she believes that the bill will progress and will be approved, and that,
Was there supposed to be anything on the screen?
yeah, it is.
Oh, there. It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm just looking at my screen and that screen.
I'm sorry. No, it's after we get done this, I'm going to show you this real quick.
Oh, very
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Anyway, she believes that the bill will pass without, so they haven't been asking for any letters of support or anything like that. Item number AB 756. That bill was actually signed by the governor last Friday. We'll wait to get more of the details on it. However, what it is doing is testing for, they call them PFAS or PFOS. And they will require testing for those. And if there's certain amounts, it will require notification of the public. But we'll get more details as that goes along.
By the way, on that particular item, I just read that the Orange County Water District has been certified to be a testing center for that PFAS, which was it's the only, I believe it's the only agency now, or maybe it's one of 3 agencies in California that are certified by the EPA to do that. So, kudos to our Orange County Water District.
Yes.
Good, Sonia.
AB 1752, which is our bill. Obviously, the last time it was dealt with was in the committee on July 10th, and it passed 7-0. It'll be heard again after they come back from recess in August. SB 200, that bill was actually signed by the governor yesterday. That's the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. And I think those are all the changes until they come back. What I was going to show you really quickly was, thanks to Director Dennis Erdman, last year he encouraged us to submit for the WEFTEC Ike video outreach. And so last year we did, and we submitted a couple, and they accepted one, which we were really pleased about. This year we accepted 2, and both of them were selected. I think there's 8 or 9 in total that were selected. So those will be shown at the conference in Chicago, the end of the month, beginning of October. So this is the first one. I'm just going to show the first one. I'll show you all the way through because it's very short. The second one, I'm just going to show you part.
There's aspirin, adrenaline, and also aminophylline, amphetamine, adenosine, augmentin, and rifampicin, amoxicillin, penicillin, heparin, and warfarin, and estrogen, progesterone, and canesten, and chloroquine. There's bendraflumethiazide and also cyclophosphamide, and metoclopramide, acetazolamide, tropicamide, loperamide, and milleride, and cyclazine, and fusamide. And if you're up the duff, then you'd best avoid thalidomide. There's lithium, fluoxetine, and also amitriptyline, paroxetine, digoxin, GTN, and azathioprine, meconazole, atenolol, and also chloramphenicol. And if you want to overdose, there's always paracetamol. There's nightness and there's phenytoin, Zyrtec, and diazepam, and lithium, temazepam, midazolam, clonazepam, testosterone, aldosterone, and Valium, and insulin, and lignocaine, and piriton, and Ventolin, and Ritalin. There's cefuroxime, cefataxime, cephalaxime, kefedrine, and metronidazole, and ketoconazole, trimethoprim, erythromycin, gentamicin, macrolides, mifedapine, and Actifed, and Sudafed, and Calpol with no sugar in. There's phenelzine and hyoscine.
The second one is actually quite long, so I'm just going to show you the first minute of it. We actually took one of our customer service representatives, Tina, and we turned her into a caricature for this. That one's a little long because it, quite frankly, takes a lot to explain. However, it's fun. One of the questions I often get is, why is there no voice? There's just music. And quite frankly, the reason we do that is because most videos are watched on people's phones and without volume, because they're usually doing something else and they're multitasking at the time. So that is why we use the words and we add the music in case someone is listening to it. But it's kind of fun, and we're happy that they chose it. And thank you again to Director Erdman for showing us to get our nomination papers in. So,
Well, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. It's great to see this. It's great to go to this conference and go into the Interactive Knowledge Exchange, which is what the IKE is, Interactive Knowledge Exchange. And you sit in a room, there's about 5 or 6 chairs around a video screen, and they've got 5 or 6 of these screens around the room. You put headphones on and you watch videos like this that have been produced by many agencies across the country. Some of them are talking about conservation, some of them are talking about safety, some are they just have any number of topics. And we've come up with, Sonia, your crew has come up with 2 really great ones. I'm sure they'll be well received, and I hope there's some acknowledgement of that from the Interactive Knowledge Exchange Forum when it's all finished. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Rick?
First off, they look great. I think they're interesting. It'd be fun to do all of the water district employees in those.
That's our goal,
yeah,
to make it through.
But the one question I have for social media, do we have versions that are in that magic spot of about 60 seconds? And if so, hopefully those can get disseminated and maybe a link to the extended version. Just interestingly enough, today I saw a sponsored link about I'm conserving, but my rates are going up. And so I was curious enough to click on it and kind of followed along through and got to the end. And it was the law firm effectively fishing for people to sue their water agencies over their rates. So, that's out there. I know from what we've done with our rate study that I believe was considered a modeled rate study, and the consultant has used that amongst other agencies, which is good. And I believe what were we, 8 or 9 meetings, I think, in sum total. But I just think it'd be good for us to get in front of that on the social media sooner than later, because again, like I said, it was interesting enough today that came through, and I didn't put in all my information in, but I'm thinking maybe I will go back through, because it looks like that they would then go target our agency, due to the zip code, and just see what that process looks like and how much they're actually out there really fishing for, folks to sue agencies. So.
Yeah, we do do a variety of different ones. Almost every day we have something different on social media. A lot of them are 30 seconds, 60-second spots. We just did one that went yesterday for advertising for a construction inspector. And we do sponsor those posts sometimes. We upped our budget this year so we could do more of that. We did do it for the desalination hearing, and we actually spent $500, which is really large, and we got like 30,000, I think, impressions. It was really good, and it was just in the 6 cities surrounding us. So we're trying to do things differently and a little bit more fun, and we'll see what happens. Okay, thank you.
Very good. Congratulations. And are you going to Chicago to accept the award?
No.
Okay,
I am
good.
going to a conference for the PIOs. It's at around the same time, so
Very
can't
good.
be gone too long.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. Next item, number 9, is the tunnel stabilization, and
I'll
looking to
introduce
Joe
this.
to start up.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, Board of Directors. I'm just going to introduce this, and our program manager, Dave Neal's in the audience to provide the presentation. We have some good news to bring to the board and the people here present with respect to the progress and performance on the job and where we're at with it. And without further ado, I'd like Dave to go ahead and give the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. This is a presentation that we used with the South Laguna Advisory Committee last night, and I think it's very indicative of where we are with the program right now. We'll give you a little overview of the whole project again for those online and on TV, and we'll talk about a construction schedule and costs and where we are moving forward with the various phases of the project. As you can notice, we have 4 phases. We have completed phase 1, which is the red in the center of the diagram. Phase 2, we are approximately, as of today, about 95% complete. It's 91% in the staff report, but we've added a little more progress. With the mining, there's still adits that have to be repaired and other things like that that are moving along. So overall total is about 75% complete with phase 2. Phase 4, we went to bid on April 15th, and I'll give you a little more report as we move forward on that. Phase 3, we expect to go to bid in September of this year with the hope of awarding in November to bring it to the November board so that we can start work in January of 2020. Shaft access in phase 1, pretty straightforward. It was 104 foot deep. Access tunnel was 340 feet. We did 300 feet in one direction, 311, and we added another 300 feet in a change order in phase 1 to give us a little coverage between the bidding time of phase 1 and phase 2. But a lot of community outreach, and we've had very, very tremendous support from the community for the work we've done. And I think the community's been very happy with the contractor and with the way we've progressed on the project. Phase 2 was a little bit larger. It's a total of about 3,700 square feet or linear feet of tunnel, with about 1,500 feet to the southbound and 2,368 northbound. Southbound had about 22 laterals to rebuild. Northbound had about 15 laterals. We did a realignment around Lido, 145 feet, to get out from underneath some of the building and structure there. And we added rebuild of the hospital lateral called Manhole G, which is on Circle Drive. Progress to date in Phase 2 is pretty good. Right now, it shows on this diagram that we're about 91% complete, but we're actually about 94-95% in both of these directions. Southbound has broken in through what we call a hole through. We've holed out into adit 16A and B in that area that is open between the ravine there. And we've actually mined in on adit B side to the south, and are progressing towards Station 7400, which will be the completion of mining for the southbound direction. In northbound, we have mined up to the low cover realignment right at Portal 4. We stopped there waiting until we can break out of Portal 4 when we have the opportunity to get on the beach after Labor Day. So we've gone back and we're at adit 5 and rebuilding adits along there. And adit 5 is one of the longer adits. It's under Lido, and it's also an area where there's a lot of fill that was done at the time. It was done as cut cover and then filled. And so it's a very tedious process to mine through that section.
Dave, come back to that map, please. The southerly end of Phase 2 there, we're at it, 16A and B are. Is that joining that section that was replaced maybe 10 years ago?
We're through that section. We've gone through that section.
Through the section.
Through that section, and then mined the a portion between where that section ended and the adit 16A and B. So we're completely through that. We poured another floor in there to support it, because it was not designed for the heavy equipment that we brought into it.
I see. Okay. Yes, sir.
Because our beaches are precious resources, no matter what time of the year. I think and maybe I'll just ask this: do we have, when equipment's going to be down on the beach, at least for the initial first couple days, do we have anybody there, say, a public information officer or the like, to help alleviate any stress that local folks might have? I've been paying attention to social media for a long time, and it tends to flare up on when heavy equipment and projects are happening in Laguna, and people pull the fire alarm, not realizing that these projects are fully permitted, fully noticed, but they hadn't been noticed to the folks that are going to show up and see something and be in a shock. And additionally to that, some of the sites that gained a lot of negative attention, from a layperson's point of view, they looked really sloppy. They didn't look like they were buttoned up and cleaned up, and the equipment, appeared to be scattered. So I just, we've come so far and done such a great job with the community. I just want to make sure that when we get to that beach environment, that we're proactive and preemptive and out in front of it, so that we don't get caught in that kind of web of negativity that happens.
Yeah, we have not provided for a public relations persons to be on site when we're on the beaches. We have provided for security fencing that is got lats in it so that it's out of sight. And we have direct access points where that access is limited, like coming down Camel Point Drive right into our facility. On Phase 4, when that starts, we have to remove part of that wall in front of the restaurant and a couple of those light posts to get truck traffic in to haul the muck away, that sort of thing. But that is also going to be separated, and we've met with the owner of the facility and with the county and with the various agencies involved down there and discussed all of the activities. But We will have our inspectors on site, as will the contractor, and we need to talk to Sonia about possibility of somebody being there from the public when we first get going.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. At least have a table or something to kind of alert folks, because again, it's
Yeah.
an ounce of the preemptive, it pays off dividends in the long run.
Yeah, well, it definitely, especially in phase 4, because that's right out in everybody's face that can see it from the parking lot. So,
Good, thank you.
our pipe protection progress has really gone along well. We've had very good success with it. They use a foam that they cover the existing Techite pipe with, and wrap the posts so that we can pull the posts out after we pour concrete. And then we put in a rebar cage, and you can see the concrete pour encapsulation. Once that's set up, we can then mine over that and remove all of that timber as we go and mine through it. To facilitate that, the contractors used a number of very innovative ways, and one of the things they did was bring in a small 11-inch gauge rail system that they could lay on and go underneath that into the existing tunnel to carry their rebar, and it enabled them to make pours of a couple hundred feet at a time. So by pouring a couple hundred feet, that means you can mine for a couple hundred feet. So you can batch yourself and plan that cycle much better.
And this is way into I'll use the forest. The timber that was used, is there any value to that? Because I know there are quite a few companies that do kind of refurbish old, and I don't know what kind of timber that is. Is it, if it's
No, this is
redwood or
it's all impregnated with creosote.
Okay.
It all has to go to a hazardous facility.
Understood.
Has to be documented and controlled the whole time.
Good.
So we have very strict rules on how that is handled.
Okay.
Yeah. It's beautiful timber. I wish there was some way it could be, but it can't be. Tunnel excavation is moving along really well. The contractor chose to use a slightly larger excavation and to use steel sets as the initial support. So he put in 4x13 steel set arches on 5-foot centers. That allows him to batch his shotcrete work, because the shotcrete is actually the final liner. It's a poly-impregnated shotcrete that is a very strong 100-year lifestyle. So the steel sets allowed him to go faster, which has saved us time and money overall. We've had, to date, 37 of laterals that we've had to redo. That involves getting to the lateral where it either comes in the top or the side of the tunnel, and then cutting a niche out, and then relocating that lateral off of the top of the Techite pipe so that we can then encapsulate it and mine over it. So we have to move all of those laterals out of the way so we can get the machines and equipment through the mine. Manhole G was a very successful portion of the work that was added. The drop manhole is 72 feet deep. It was quite deteriorated. The pipe in the manhole was quite deteriorated. It had been there for quite some time. It's in the middle of Circle Drive, which is a very, very tight area. And it required us the contractor to bring in a bypass pumping system, because we had to maintain the flow. You can't shut off the hospital, obviously, and all of the homes that are also attached to that line. Put in a new pipe, which meant building a scaffolding inside of the manhole, a 5-foot manhole, and hanging the new pipe, and then tying in the bypass and valving, doing the transfer at the surface, and also repairing and rebuilding all the connections at each side of the manhole. There's a flexible coupling that goes out there, so that if there's movement on the manhole, you're protected.
I have a question for, maybe it's Joe. There were some homes on Circle Drive at one time that were using pumps. Were we able to get those folks off with this new construction? I think there were some little lift stations.
Yes, sir. I actually really didn't have that much to do with the tunnel, but there was a private lift station that somehow the district had taken some temporary maintenance of 30 years ago, and realized it really was a private system. So we did negotiate with them, and that has actually been turned back over to them. And the two other houses that were connected to that because it was on private property, actually have connected to the sewer system in the street, the gravity system in the street. That gravity system flows to this drop manhole piping that Dave's talking about.
Perfect.
The other house, because of the elevation of it in the back,
Just can't
actually
get
it that still pumps up to the street. And in fact, the other house pumps up the street as well. They had to put their own sump pump in. So that's off of our maintenance requirements
No,
and
I
list.
understand. I was just hoping that they could go gravity. That doesn't sound like that's possible.
They're still pumping, but again, they're private pumping systems that they need to maintain. And
Thank you, Joe.
thank you.
What was so successful about this is the cooperation we had with Chris Newton and Joe McDewitt and their staff, and with the contractor, with the pumping people, and with our CM staff, because it took 3 days to do this whole bit of work, and that's remarkable. Everything went fine. We had to shut down at nights, obviously, so those were 3 work days to do all of this, and that was pretty remarkable. And we did everything from within the manhole, off of the scaffolding.
Dave, could I mention something here? Take just for an intermission or quick break. This wasn't included in the original tunnel work because we hadn't really considered it. And as we got close to this area, we realized that the condition of this piping and this part of the system was in pretty bad shape. And Dave and our CM and our staff and the contractor, I just want to give kudos to them because they did a really good job planning. This took a lot of planning, and it was a pretty complicated piece of work. And they did a great job on getting this done. And I don't think we had any complaints with the neighbors. And Circle Drive neighbors have been a little bit vocal over the years. So we did good notification, public notification. And I just wanted to thank these guys for doing a really great job on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Some of the improvements that the contractor came up with in the portions of the work when we went into phase 2, we added a tail tunnel because in phase 1 we allowed them to lower the shaft so it accommodate rail. The distances in the tunnel, you can't use diesel equipment. You could never ventilate it properly because of the ventilation requirements from the amount of diesels that you would add to have in the tunnel would have been impossible to maintain. So the contractor came and widened the portion that goes under the Pacifico sideways so we could have dual rail. And that allows us to bring trains in mind from both directions in phase 2. And so we could do a swap with a number of switches there to run a dual ray system. And then they drove a tail tunnel from the shaft at their expense out to the property line to the east of the shaft so that the train could pull through and we could lift the muck boxes off and dump them and then drop them back on. So it makes a very efficient train system. It also makes a very efficient storage area for the materials and utilities and supplies they need for the tunnel. You can see this is the switch coming out of the tunnel into the main tunnel, and the little 3-ton Lokis and the 3-yard muck cars that we used on the project. Spoil handling and disposal. You can see in that top left picture that the muck box is lifted right off the bogies and set into a little device on the surface that breaks the box in half, spills the muck, they pick it back up, gravity sets it, and you drop it back down on the bogies, and away you go. So a very fast mucking system. Then they use an excavator to load the truck. And we haul it down to the 30-acre site in Lot A, where we have a location where we're dumping all the muck. Any foreign material that might get in there gets separated, and that material is all graded. We have a grading plan and a SWIPPIES plan around there. And we use compaction on that pile so that all that is built to standard.
Is it the intention to use the spoil from the tunnel on the 30 acres at some point in the future? Will that material pass all the necessary tests to be able to be used for a foundation or for filling and raising up to get out of the floodplains?
Yes.
Excellent.
The only thing that will be required is there may be some rock piles that will be required if you put a building structure on it for support of that building structure. And there are those in Lot A that were put in, but we didn't. But all the compaction is done, the nuclear testing is done, and the material is graded to meet standards. Remaining work we've got to do is go into Camel Point Beach to Portal 4. This is the the Portal 4 you can see down there. So there's the beach activities there. We'll have to move the one volleyball court and a couple of fire pits out of there and temporarily relocate those. And then we'll have to address that cliff face because the large boulders that are just hanging on the face, we'll have to do some scaling to protect the people when we make the excavation into that existing portal to protect the miners. And we'll put a false set of steel there to protect that. And then we have to replace the manholes that are there, manhole 1193 and the connection to the existing pipe, which from this point to through Aliso Beach and out to the treatment plant have all been stick lined. So this will be the end of the new pipe at this point.
When is that work scheduled for?
Labor Day.
Labor Day?
We start on Labor Day. Yeah.
And can you go back a slide?
Mm-hmm.
Is the solar panel there and the whatever the equipment there, is that district?
Yeah, that's districts. That's for a little pump, a little sump pump there, because water comes down through that and that pumps off into the system.
If that is district property, and since we're talking about Labor Day to kind of dovetail into Rick's suggestion, I know a lot of projects have the government funding boards and things like that. Perhaps we could put up an informational board well in advance of the Labor Day work to let people know that work is coming for that area.
We can do that, and we will be posting boards there, both there and at in Phase 4 for Portal 2, but we can do that in advance. It's a good suggestion. This is
before you leave that slide where the panel is the photovoltaic panel. Is that a storm drain to the left of that panel, or a
no? That's a lateral.
A lateral.
Yeah, that's a lateral. It comes off the house
there.
and go out in the open, and it goes into the manhole itself.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we have to correct, and it's in not very good shape.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we're also going to move the tunnel back here to get it away from very low cover. So the portion of the tunnel, I'll show you. I think I've got it in another slide. I don't have it right in this alignment. This is 16A and B, so we've made a physical barrier, a plywood fence, to keep the looky-loos off of where we're working up there, and we've created a pad. And what happened to those slides? They're gone. And some stairs for access at some point in time. And that pad is completed now. The stairs are completed. They've moved it across the road header across that zone, and mined into the other side. And we'll mine 56 feet to where we complete mining for Phase 2. The area at Portal 4. We have bulkheaded off the old pipe zone through there where we're going to run the bypass around, and we'll backfill that with a lean concrete fill, and so that will be permanently abandoned and secured, and then we'll run a shoe fly, what I call a shoe fly, around that corner and tie into the new manhole. Cost and schedule, well, Phase 1, we went to bid and awarded in NTP in February of 17. We completed it in June of 18. Phase 2, we submitted the NTP in May of 18. Right now, the baseline schedule shows it completing on March 20th of 2020. However, it appears that they'll finish somewhere in mid-December of 2020. The mining itself will finish in August. In 2 weeks, we should be done with the mining. And then it's a matter of adit repairs and those types of things. Construction costs to date, we're running right now all in about $33 million on $25.5 million on Phase 2 with the change orders for the manhole G work and some other minor work that was done. And in Phase 1, $7.1 million with about $2.3 million, which includes the new crane, so a bunch of changes, deepening the shaft, things like that we did in Phase 1. Going forward, Phase 4, we advertised for bid on April 15th. The bid opening was on June 27th. We estimate starting construction in 2019. And one of the recommended actions for the board tonight, we had, of the 5 pre-qualified bidders, we had 3 bidders come to our April 29th pre-bid meeting.
Dave, I'm sorry, that's the next agenda item, actually.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a full staff report on the next
Okay.
agenda item.
All right. Then, so we expect this to last about 9 months, and that's going into Portal 2, which is Aliso Beach, securing that area, hand mining back in a total of 460 feet, and abandoning the last 43 feet, and relocating some of those laterals, and replacing the manhole, and putting an odor control system in place. Phase 3, we have got the 100% design completed. We expect a bid in fourth quarter, probably late September, with the idea that we can award in late October, early for the November board meeting, and be seamless as we move in with our notice to proceed in construction for January of 2020. That's about a 30-month period. Phase 3 represents about 55% of the total work on the project, because not only is it mining out the last 4,400 feet, 760 feet of that is new tunnel that goes out under La Hacienda Drive, and we abandon that more of that portion. It goes under the cliffs down there near from the drop manhole to add at 25. It also includes pouring the final floor slab, the whole length of the tunnel, and then installing the pipe, and then the demob of the whole system from the completion of work. So there's quite a bit of work in the piping and in the floor slab and those things that aren't included in the other activities that we've done to date. Again, Phase 3 is a single heading with only access from the 4th Avenue shaft site. So we're already a couple thousand feet away from the bottom of the shaft, so there's lots of logistics on how we move and handle our equipment and people. All the work is on the critical path, so everything we do there is a critical path item. So there's a lot of attention to each item. There's a number of curves and realignments with the new area, but there's also a section under 3 Arch Bay, under Bay Drive, that is an ancient landslide that has seen slide activities from the 20s to the 70s to the 90s to the 2000s. And there's some very extensive stabilization work that's been done in that area with piles and soil nails and one thing and another. And so we are taking a tremendous amount of caution in how we approach that, how we instrument that area so we can monitor it, how we mine through that area, and those items that are necessary for us to make sure that we are safe, number one, and that we're safe for the public.
Rick.
Because of those historic slides, do we have any indication of what triggers those slides? Is it
there's a difference.
Seismic? Is it water events? Like
no, near as I can tell, I'm a geologist, but I'm not a coastal expert. But what I read and what I've seen is that the San Onofre Formation in that area isn't the same kind of breccia that we see normally. It's a different portion of the formation where it's sand, more sandy, and it has clay lenses that are run 1 to 4 feet, and they dip towards the sea at about 5% grade, and there's groundwater on those clay slips. So you got a natural phenomena right there, and the mass of the size of it just slid off at some point in time, and it just continues. Although the stabilization efforts there are quite extensive. That being said, the final roadway concrete placement and the new pipe selection process, and then we have to tie back in all 82 of those laterals have to go back into the new pipe. So that's part of the pipe selection requirements that we have, as well as the work. So it's pretty extensive.
Go ahead, Dennis, please.
Yeah, Dave, has it been determined among the staff here and the engineering department about whether the old pipe will be salvaged in any way or be able to be used in the future? I know you talk about disconnecting and reconnecting the laterals, and if that's the case, then it would appear that the old pipe that lies under the floor will no longer be accessible for use. But I'm interested to know what decisions have been made regarding the future potential for use of that pipe if it ever became desirable for some reason.
As a transmission pipeline, it will be usable. It won't be accessible for adding. And you could tie into the old tie-ins because each one of those are going to be capped and as we transfer it to the new pipe. So the old connections will be there and capped. But to get into the pipe itself, we'd have to break the concrete out. But the pipe itself will be available as a transmission pipe, and you could get to laterals if you had to.
Thank you.
Rick. Go ahead, Rick.
Dave, you didn't mention safety.
You got me.
Pardon?
That was my next. That was my next thing.
Oh, what? Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I don't have a slide for it because I want to brag on it a little bit.
We want you to.
The project has been extremely well managed, both from the construction manager side of it, but from the contractor side of it. And we've had 0 incidents or accidents on the project since we started.
That is
phenomenal.
That's outstanding.
That's outstanding. We've had a number of surprise inspections from Cal OSHA. They like to drive out here and drive by. Just happen to be stopping by. Just want to stick our head in the door. And we've had no violations. So we've had 0 violations, not even one ground bad. And it's been phenomenal. And we're very, very proud of that. And I'm personally very proud of our people that have been able to accomplish that because we've had all of the contractors people, we've had district people, we've had our CM staff in there every day almost. And so that's quite an accomplishment.
That's great.
Same question? Okay. Yes, Dennis.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that this topic is scheduled for a presentation on August the 1st. Is it the American Society of Civil Engineers or the Orange County Water Association?
It's under ACE, but it's the EWRI, I believe, Environmental Water Resource Institute is the actual organization.
And it's a luncheon meeting and presentation of this project?
That's correct, at Dave and Buster's. Dave and Buster's.
Dave and Buster's. So,
at the Spectrum.
Yeah, I will not be in town for that, but I certainly would like to attend and wish the staff excellent luck in making a nice presentation. I'm sure it'll be great and well received. So.
Thank you.
One more item, Bill. And again, Dave, compliments to the staff and to the construction management team. The amount of change orders on phase 2 is extraordinarily low. The construction change orders on phase 1 appear to be higher, but the reasons for those change orders are, again, very, very important to understand, and that is that deepening the shaft allowed for the use of the rail. It decreased the amount of slope underneath Pacific Coast Highway, which is what allowed for the rail usage here. And so that was money well spent under phase 1 to make those change orders. And then for phase 2, of course, to have such a very small amount of change order in a $25 million contract is extraordinary. So congratulations again to the staff.
And it's our CM and our contractor negotiation. They're continually negotiating every day as we go through this thing. Yep. And I think it's been very remarkable. I agree with you.
Also, David, to add on to Dennis's remark there, you mentioned the crane, and part of that change order was to accommodate the local residents there to get away from the diesel noise and fumes and so forth. So we've got all electric on that project to really help our local folks. So anyway, we really appreciate it. And I'm just echoing what Dennis said. Staff, all our staff, yourself and the Parsons group did a tremendous job, and to have 0 incidents, I think our board is so pleased to hear that. Versus, we haven't heard there's no nightmares. So we're really happy with your performance. Thank you so much
Thank
to
you.
the whole team.
Okay.
Thank you. Very good. That was an information item, and we appreciate that. Right at this point in time, it's 7:23. Why don't we come back at 7:30? Thank you. Okay. Oh, all right, I guess we'll resume here. Item number 10, more of the tunnel stabilization project. And again, Joe McDivitt.
Thank you, Mr. President and Directors. This is recommending or asking the board to approve recommending a contract for Phase 4 of the tunnel. This section of the tunnel is the piece from Portal 2, which is at Aliso Beach and under Camel Point. The entire length is about 510 feet, of which 460 feet of the tunnel will be rehabilitated, and the remaining 50 feet will be backfilled. It's at the very end, and there's no exit out of that end of the tunnel onto the beach, so there was really no reason to go any further with rehabilitation. And, of course, it'll be properly backfilled. The team put together the plans and specs and went out for the official bid process through the Planet Bids, and we only received one bid, and that was from the contractor that's doing the work, Drill Tech. The original bid came in at about $6.7 million. Our team was concerned about the price, especially only having one bid. So we met with them and negotiated some of the cost out of the contract and got it down to $6.1 million. So we're still a little concerned about the price, again, only having one bid, but we went back and looked at the work that we did in 2007, which is very similar length and complication, and it was about 6.1 or 2 million. So we had something to gauge it by, and that was 12 years ago. So with inflation and acceleration of cost over 12 years, we felt it was reasonable. Just to talk a little bit about this section of the tunnel, I mentioned Portal 2. That portal, as part of this work, that portal gets totally rebuilt. We have to dig into the slope there and install soldier piling and lagging for shoring purposes to be able to work under that house safely. And then, as I mentioned, go under the Camel Point community itself. During the permitting and entitlement phase, we had numerous discussions and meetings with the homeowners there for the additional easements that we need in that section of the tunnel. I think that the director's comments tonight about providing a information board or some kind of meeting to inform the public before we start that work is excellent. And when we were doing the permitting work, we actually had some meetings out there at the beach, and we had some aerial photos set up and boards, and I think that really helped our permitting process to get through. So I think that same process is an excellent idea, and I think we should really look at doing that. So I just kind of gave a cursory. Dave talked about this a little bit. I was going to ask if you wanted to add anything to this from your perspective or comments on this phase of the work, Dave. Could you get the microphone?
When we looked at the bid and when it originally came in, we looked at unit pricing, which is really not apropos because it's more of a lump sum setup. But however, we were concerned about the risk and schedule that was included in it. So that's where the savings really came. We negotiated a contractor. We took some of the risk out, and adapted the schedule so that we could bring the price down into a reasonable number. And we're very comfortable with that number. We know that it's a good number for the contractor, obviously, but it's also a good number for the district. And it falls in line with where we think we should be overall on the project with the overall budget for the project.
What were you estimating this segment to be?
The original estimates were done about 3 years ago, and they were about 3.4 million. However, since that time, there's been some number of changes to the design and to the requirements for the thing. For example, the original design was to go bald all the way through there and just use a 2-inch flash coat. We added the steel for additional stability, and we increased the thickness of the shotcrete. And we changed the way we approach the slope and the manhole that we have to replace, and added an odor control facility. So those are the changes that are directly involved.
You answered my other question. I was going to wonder about the unit price, but I understand now.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you. Yes, Dennis.
Yes, in the scope of work, there's a couple of items. First of all, mobilization to the project. It would seem to me that Drill Tech really has already mobilized, so I presume that they didn't have a mobilization number in, or we've negotiated that mobilization number.
No, there's a 4% mobilization number in there, and that's because we have to fence it. We have to remove some palm trees. We have to put a gully in there to hold the rainwater right behind that restaurant there. there's a gully that when the big rains come, and this will be during the rain season, it flows 4 or 5 foot deep and blows right out through that riprap wall. So we have to get trucks over that. We also have to remove a portion of that little stone fencing they have in front and a part of the curbing and a couple of those light posts so that there's room for the trucks, because we can't drive out on the beach and come back up. We have to drive along that little ledge in front of, between the riprap and the wall at the restaurant.
There's a technical term here also that I'm not familiar with, and it says rebar spiles for structural liner, grouted spiles for structural liner.
Yeah, the grouted spiles are basically, we drill in a Dewey-Dag 50,000-pound rebar and grout it in place. And we do that on, depending on where we are, the first ones will be 20 foot long and on 1 foot centers across the top. And they're grouted in place. They form an umbrella that supports everything above us. We mine in so far and we add another row. We mine in again and we add another row so that we can get underneath that walkway and portion of the face of the cliff under the Roberts House.
So it's a form of a rock bolt. Then.
It's a form of a rock bolt, except it's horizontal
Gotcha.
at about 7 degrees look up rather than vertical.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation.
Director Urban, I'd like to mention too that in the mobilization, their bonds are also included, and that's a fairly substantial cost on their mobilization cost. And at 4%, it's actually kind of light. They wanted to negotiate a higher number. We stuck with the 4%. I believe it's one of the SRF loan covenants, and so it's a reasonable mobilization cost.
I guess I'll make the assumption, Drill Tech didn't know they were the only bidder.
No, we assume they did not.
Yeah, so we assume that.
We know that
should be fair.
Kiewit and Atkinson both came to the pre-bid meeting. We know that they knew that Atkinson was soliciting bids from suppliers. But right now, everybody is really quite large. The larger companies are all quite busy. For example, I'm a technical advisor to the Kiewit Shea project in New York. It's a $760 million project going underneath the Hudson River with a bypass tunnel for the Delaware Aqueduct. And there's a number of those types of projects that are out right now that the big guys are all busy as little beavers.
You bet. Yes, sir.
I think this is really an excellent step forward to complete the project, and I would like to move the recommended action.
Second.
All right, we do have a motion, and we do have a second. And so, any further discussion? Any? I should ask Jody. Anybody from the public would like to say anything on this item?
No request to speak.
Thank you. So we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? There you go. Jody, thank you. And thank you, Dave, for a good presentation there. Both presentations. Thank you. Number 11 is our Reservoir 2B, the rehab project. And Joe, again.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President and directors. I want to start out with this staff report to let the board know there's a twist on this, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. This is Reservoir 2B, which is the one up above Cianothos. It's a 100,000-gallon reservoir. It is out of service because we have corrosion at where the floor meets the wall. We'd like to do a quick turnaround on this, so we solicited a bid from we actually asked two companies to do the fiber reinforcement polywrap material, and we got a quote from one. The other one was too busy to quote. It's about $97,000, I believe. So in the interim, after that quote was received and we prepared the staff report to bring to the board, we've had the opportunity to do some additional inspections on the reservoir floor, and the fiber carbon wrap may not be the most appropriate application, or if it is, requires some significant modifications to the floor before it can be applied. So with that, Roman, who's in the audience here, who can answer technical questions when I finish with my part of the presentation, with that we asked a tank repair contractor to look at it from plating or metal plates on the floor to replace it instead of using the carbon. And again, the carbon is not totally discarded at this time, but there's a lot of modifications that have to be done to the floor, so we're thinking it might be just better to do the plating on the floor to be able to make that repair fairly quickly and get this reservoir back in service. I believe that we met today, or Roman met today with the contractor. They're going to prepare a cost for us. They give us an initial cost, but after they saw the site and how hard it is to get up there with the windy road and haul plates and everything up there, they kind of stepped back and said we need to look at our cost. This reservoir is budgeted for $300,000 this year. That was for a recoating project until we realized that we had the issues with the floor and the corrosion and the tank being out of service. So we do have the budget to make the repairs. The longer, bigger picture here is, and I think most of the board is aware of the Laguna Beach, Orange County Fire Department's concerns about fire preparation and suppression in this area. And there's been discussion about enlarging the reservoir, which is a longer term project. We're looking at potentially doubling the size, putting 2 reservoirs up there. It'll require some design work and some modifications to the site to be able to do that. That is separate from this staff report tonight, or this action tonight, but I wanted to kind of fill you in so you know what's going on in the longer picture, longer term.
So am I hearing that we're going to rehab this and then put a second reservoir adjacent to it?
Well, I think what that is all part of the evaluation needs to be done.
Or reconstruct it?
Yes.
Total.
What we want to look at now is making the repair and then do the design and analysis to put either a larger reservoir, 2 reservoirs. How can we enlarge this and make use of the space up there? Because it is limited. There's actually the site itself is sizable to put a larger reservoir, but it's a lot of slope that would have to be cut back. So to give us time to do that, we'd like to make the interim repairs. It's probably going to take a couple of years before we get a new reservoir designed and installed, a year and a half to 2 years, depending on the design, the cost, and the modifications we have to make, the permitting, the whole thing. So we really need to get this reservoir back in service. So the twist is that we have a bid and a recommendation tonight to award for $97,000. We're waiting to get revised additional study done, find out if we have lead-based paint, find out what the floor looks like, and then get the revised bids from probably both the carbon fiber wrap type company and also a company to do the replating or the metal work. We're estimating, and Roman has a general cost estimate of about up to $135,000. What I was going to request or ask if the board could authorize us or authorize the general manager to issue a contract up to not to exceed $150,000. Bringing that back to the board, but that's next month in August. In the meantime, we could probably get something in place within a couple weeks to set somebody up to start the work, and that's the twist that I mentioned earlier. And I wanted to, certainly, if there were any other questions I can answer or Roman can answer, we would be prepared to do so.
Dennis.
Yeah, Joe, in a previous reservoir project, I believe I remember using a Hypalon bladder in the reservoir, which would kind of essentially accomplish, I think, what it looks like you're trying to do here. But that really depends on the configuration of the reservoir, whether there's a single center column or multiple columns on the inside. I'm not sure what the configuration of this reservoir is. Single center column.
I don't think it's
on. And that would lend itself perhaps to considering doing a Hypalon bladder. Hypalon is the same material that we use for the cover of the Palisades or the Roy Brott Reservoir.
Right.
And that can be used like an internal liner, much the way race cars use a bladder inside their fuel tanks in the case of a crash.
Especially if we're only thinking about a couple of years or so.
Well, there's a couple.
I don't know what the useful life of Hypalon is, but it's well within the time period.
Yeah, there'd be a couple considerations for that. It depends on the stability of the floor and that connection at the wall, where Hypalon may not be structurally sound enough to hold that kind of weight of the water, and could be an issue. We can certainly check into that. The other issue with Hypalon is it takes a while to get it. Where the plating contractor, I believe, mentioned that he could be within. Roman, why don't you talk about that? I think that the microphone was dead or off. There you go.
Yeah, the contractor is will be ready in 2 weeks. That's what they claim, and the whole replating will takes 3-4 weeks to complete. The high pylon probably, we will take a look into it. But my concern is just to seal it unless you put a big type of bladder. But we will take a look into it, this issue, and also the question is how long does it take to fabricate, and but definitely we'll take into consideration this solution as well.
So the action that I would be asking for is if the board could approve up to $150,000, and we'll do our best to negotiate anything below, not over that, with the contractor, whether that being this fiber wrap repairs to the floor or do the plating metal replacement within the reservoir.
Well, let me read the recommended action and see if we have it correct. The Board of Directors authorized the General Manager to award a contract up to $150,000 in lieu of the 97. Does that include the contingency?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So,
Mr. President, I think this is a true emergency. We're at high risk, particularly with the weather, the conditions,
yes.
And accordingly, I'd like to move the modified recommendation for a cost for immediate repairs to Reservoir 2D in the amount not to exceed $150,000.
okay. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion, questions? None? I see none. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So that carries.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was good dialogue there. That takes us on to our future items to be considered for our agenda. Item J of the agenda here tonight. Does the board have any items they would like to add to the agenda for next meeting? I do see Director Urban.
Yes, I'd like to request that the board, in cooperation with staff, do a little bit of long-range planning and strategy relative to the work that SACWA faces in the rehabilitation of the wastewater treatment plants, both at J.B. Latham and at the coastal treatment plant. Because I think that there are a number of options for proceeding for the future on those two projects. However, those options require policy level direction to the staff and to carry down through to the engineering committee at SACWA so that we can determine whether we're going to do things the way we've always done them, and we're going to take 50-year-old treatment plants and make them brand new again with 50-year-old technology, or whether we are going to do something new, something that makes these treatment plants water reclamation facilities, or water resource recovery facilities is really the more appropriate term. The J.B. Latham plant has been called a water reclamation plant, but it has never reclaimed any water. And so we really need to, I think at this time, step up and to show some leadership in this area and not just do things the way we've always done them. We need to look at the fact that these plants, the flow conditions have changed, the needs for water in our area have changed, and some of this goes back to a meeting of the Orange County Water District a week ago, in which the Chief Water Resource Officer from Metropolitan, following Brian Caffrey, was the guest speaker. And Brian spoke about the history of Metropolitan, and he looked at the way Metropolitan has done business, and he broke his talk into generational segments of 30 years, starting at about year 1900. And when he concluded, he said he didn't have a crystal ball, but he would offer some thoughts about the next 30 years. And one of the items that he mentioned in his next 30 years is that he believed that there would be flange-to-flange connection between wastewater facilities and water facilities. That means direct potable reuse. This is coming from the man who is responsible for water resource development for the Metropolitan Water District. I can't think of a more reliable source for making such a prediction than he did. And so I think we really need now to look at our own position with respect to where we are, knowing that we've got these major projects facing us, and deciding that we want to do something different rather than the same old thing as we've done in the past. And so therefore we need some leadership in this area, but we as a board need to discuss that, and we need to discuss the costs involved in that, the impact to our ratepayers, and what it means for the long-term future. One thing about the utility business, the water and wastewater utility business, is that we're not going out of business. Or if we do, the public is going to be in big trouble. So we really need to take the long-range view of things. And that means, trying to forecast and think about the future and look at the industry trends that have happened over the years and then focus those ideas into action plans for the next 5, 10, 15 years, which is probably within the horizon we can reasonably forecast. But we do need to look at the big trends, and we need to look at how we're doing this work. And I would suggest that we sit down here and talk about that, maybe invite some guest people to come in, Brad, for example, of Metropolitan Water District, or we could perhaps view his presentation on a YouTube video or something like that. And again, these are the kinds of big picture items that are talked about when I attend the Water Environment Federation meeting once a year in Chicago or New Orleans, depending on what year it is. These topics are frequently talked about in the technical sessions and in the opening session, the plenary session. They really do look at the 30,000-foot view of things. And so I'd like to bring the rest of the board into that same thinking that and talking about how we're going to deal with these things for the future, because without talking about them, we don't know how to communicate that back to the SACWA board and to try to get our fellow agencies to understand, cooperate, and be partners in moving into a positive future and not just doing the same old thing again.
Dennis? Wayne.
Dennis, I think that's an excellent idea. And I was going to suggest we maybe have some speakers or watch that presentation and others. I'm not sure it's an agenda item as much as it is a workshop. I can see us spending, I think we should, a couple of hours on this, really, and invite a lot of folks that we think have something to contribute. So I wanted to thank you for raising that. I think it's vital we start thinking along those lines and planning.
I would concur, Dennis. We're very fortunate to have Director Erdman as one of the executive board members of SACWA. And so he's very close to what's the directions that could happen. That workshop might be good to perhaps invite, and I'll leave it up to Dennis's discretion, to maybe some of the other stakeholders that are involved in that project, as well as just the South Coast directors.
And some folks from MODOC and Met and
yeah,
wherever.
Right. So Dennis, we'll look to you to make that, whether it's a recommendation for an agenda item or to get it as a workshop, independent.
Yeah, I'll work with the general manager and the staff here to see how we can pull it all together and get the right parties here in the room to have this kind of discussion.
Great, thank you. Any other, Rick, do you have any comments? Okay. And Doug, you're good, okay. All right, well, that takes us on to our oral comments and staff discussion. So I'm reading names, but they're not necessarily here. But I will start over here, and we'll look at our Chief Financial Officer, Pamela.
Thank you. I did want to make one comment. Dave mentioned that Cal OSHA stopped by and did surprise visits at the tunnel, and when we had the meeting with the South Laguna Beach folks, I mentioned to Joe that actually the State Water Resource Board, the reps who manage our surf loan, actually showed up for a tour, and they were very impressed with what we were doing and gave us high kudos, so to speak. So I thought that was really interesting considering the issues we're having with the state, but they are impressed with our project.
Good, thank you.
They just didn't bring any money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
they didn't come with a check.
No check.
Soon.
An IOU, but no check.
A good voucher for us. And Doug? Nope. Dennis?
I'll just add one more comment, and that is good luck to Joe and the other staff members who are going to make this presentation on August the 1st. And I thought the photographs tonight were extraordinary, and very happy to see that we're documenting our project with such great photographs. I think having those slideshows available for the public every time we have a public update here, that really shows the magnitude of this work. And before, when the project is just in its conceptual stage and you really don't see the magnitude of that down there, these photographs really help to bring forward why it is costing what it does to have this project get done.
Thank you, Dennis. Art?
I think, Mr. President, I don't have anything to add.
Thank you very much.
I just had one additional thing tonight, and I love giving these. This is awesome. In the Aqua newsletter update under their Twitter chatter, I'll read South Coast Water District. July 10th, this morning, Supervisor Chris Newton, who I think is still in the audience, received an urgent call from San Juan Capistrano regarding a sewer spill. The crew arrived within 10 minutes to clear the blockage, clean up, and save the day for the neighborhood. Way to hustle, guys, South Coast. And we're very proud of our guys, our staff. And
Here, Chris. Thank you.
And we do have we're in the process of actually executing a formal agreement. I'll be bringing that to the board next month. With San Juan to provide these services, but we have been providing these services, and we reimburse them for our response, of course, but they don't have a contractor that can get to these spills quick enough, and that's why they asked us, being close by, plus we'll be involved with Santa Margarita on shared services going forward, so I just wanted to mention that.
Well, thank you, Joe. I'm glad you did excellent work and good response, so thank you. Yes. I'm sure the residents of San Juan are thanking you as well.
Can we get there in 9 minutes next time, Chris?
I think you'll beat the ambulance there. Okay, I'll take it down to Director Urkenev.
Thank you. I actually have attended few different very interesting meetings. One, the first of the three that I'm going to speak about was on July 18th, and that was the South Orange County Watershed Management Group. And it was specifically focusing on Aliso Creek and the Aliso Creek system. And they announced that the watershed project for the Army Corps was officially considered dead. So they're effectively abandoning a watershed-wide approach, which maybe if you look at the glass half full, it's a good thing. It means smaller projects could probably be expedited. The county said that they are not going to be the lead agency on that as well, so they kind of punted as well. It was well attended. There's a number of meetings that are going to kind of give the scope of what's potentially going to be available as projects, and it's everything from Arundo removal to a variety of things. So I think that it's good that we have representation there, either being myself or staff if there's important meetings coming up, because of, obviously, of our infrastructure in the watershed. The next was a town hall meeting by our congressional representation of Mike Levin. That was down at San Clemente High School. It ended up being it was Saturday. It was a standing room only crowd. It wasn't really ruckus. It was really more positive. You know, he had mostly supporters there, which was kind of refreshing, not to be in a combative environment. A couple things of note. I hadn't been to San Clemente High School in quite some time. Their parking lot is now benefiting from the shade of solar panels all throughout. So it's one of the projects that the Capistrano Unified School District is moving forward with, equipping their facilities. So that was refreshing to see them taking that step. He did mention support for the desalination effort at Doheny. Surprisingly enough, it got a tremendous amount of applause. He did announce me, and I was one of just 2 elected officials that showed up. He fielded questions for about an hour, and mostly ranging from toll road issues to the decommissioning of the San Onofre nuclear plant. So, a variety of things, but it was good for him to speak in the positive about the project. The next meeting was on July 22nd, early morning, up with Congressman Harley Ruda, and that was the community leaders water briefing. It was a pretty cursory informational, but it's good that the congressmen are open to meeting with both the public and with electeds and the professionals in different markets. It was well attended. Director Green was there. So one takeaway was he's going to be traveling to Israel during his recess and planning on touring desalination efforts in other parts of the world, and hopefully bringing back a perspective on that. He did mention a bit of the PFAS issues, so that's starting to kind of gain a little bit of attention across the board. I know that was identified at the OC Water Summit a couple months back, so I think we need to, again, be kind of on the front end of that from a communications point of view. It's those are constituents in our water that erode trust from the public, from tap water and drinking water and the like. So even if they're in parts per trillions, there's still folks that are going to be extremely nervous about that when those really kind of high impact headlines come out. It was those. That's briefly what I've attended since our last board meeting.
Thank you, Rick. Wayne?
I have nothing to add tonight.
Well, thank you. Well, I just want to thank you for all those comments this evening, and I'll just I have nothing extra to. But meeting is now adjourned.